into a new video. I am so excited to be making this. First off though, it is so hot in this room. I turned the fan off so it wouldn't interfere with the sound, and it's like 80 degrees in here, so if my makeup melts off by the end of this video, you know why. As of right now, yesterday Taylor Swift just surprise dropped a whole album called Folklore, and if you don't already know, I'm a very big Taylor Swift fan, like a huge Taylor Swift fan. I have been since she released her first album, what was that, 10 years ago, 10 plus years ago. And so to have all the excitement of a whole new album yesterday and a new music video was incredible. And then today, the merch that I ordered back in May finally came. So I have this new Cruel Summer shirt that I'm wearing, and I am just having a great time. So what I'm going to be doing is recommending a couple books. For each of them I have 2, and then for Folklore I actually have 4 recommendations. I want to recommend a book based on each of Taylor Swift's albums. I feel like this probably has been done before on BookTube. I don't know for sure. I didn't even bother looking it up. I am just so excited. And now most of these recommendations, I can't specifically explain why some of them fit. They just have the same feelings for me. So like if the album encompasses a sort of feeling throughout the whole thing, that is how I applied it to the books that I chose. And maybe if you read them you won't feel the exact same way, but here we are. So let's just go ahead and get started. We've got 8 albums to get through and more books. So I'm gonna go in order with the first album starting first. So her debut album, Taylor Swift. I do really love this album. It's not one I listen to very often anymore just because I like listening to the newer albums, but this is the album that made me fall in love with Taylor Swift, so let's go ahead and get into the book recommendations for Taylor Swift's debut album. The first one I have is To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. I know I feel like everyone has read this book at this point, but I truly feel like this like teen rom-com happy feeling type of book just really perfectly fits those emotions that Taylor is addressing in the first album. I feel like Lara Jean would actually listen to the debut Taylor Swift album quite a bit and relate to it a lot, so I just feel like the feelings in this book and in this series really just correspond with those high school love type of feelings that are in the first album. If you don't already know, which I feel like everyone knows what To All the Boys I Loved Before is about, but this is about a teenager, Lara Jean, who writes love letters to her crushes, and then once she writes them and seals them, she decides she doesn't have crushes on them anymore. But one day she finds out that somebody has sent out her letters to all of her crushes, ranging from like the 5th grade crush she had to her brother's boyfriend who she had a crush on. So she has to deal with the fallout of that, and she ends up going into sort of a fake dating situation with the most popular boy in school to distract from the fact that she sent a love letter to her sister's boyfriend. It is an absolute joy to read, and there are 2 out of the 3 movies out as well, and those are so good. So if you're looking for something fun and happy and just makes you feel so good, that is what this book will be. The other book I chose for the debut album is Dumplin by Julie Murphy. This is another high school love story type of book, and I chose this one because of the personality that Dumplin has. It's all about self-love and self-acceptance and how hard of a journey that is to take, which I feel like is something that Taylor really starts to address even in that first album with the song like Invisible and Perfectly Good Heart and all that. I just feel like she's really starting to find herself. I think that's a theme you find in all of Taylor's albums, is finding yourself and accepting yourself. And I think that Dumplin has that same sort of energy in it, and I think it's also a great high school romance, and I think that she would also listen to this Taylor Swift album. I think she does even drop a couple Taylor Swift references in the book, although Dolly Parton is the biggest influence musically in that book, of course, but I think that this book really does kind of go with the vibe of that first country album. And on to Taylor Swift's second album that came out. It is Fearless. Now this one, I remember when it came out, I went and bought it at Target, and it had all the bonus songs on it, and I just absolutely fell in love with all the songs. It has a lot of great songs. It has songs that are really happy, and it has songs that are really sad, like Breathe and White Horse, and they're all incredible, and I think it was a real step up from the debut. Taylor with every album just gets better and better. So let's get into the two books I have recommended for this one. The first recommendation for Fearless I have is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I have read this book a couple times and I have loved it more and more every time, and as I'm looking at it I want to read it again because I mean, look at this edition. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it has this art in the front of Kath and Levi, and like, is it Levi or is it Levi? I don't know. That's one thing I never did figure out about this book, but like, this is a gorgeous edition. Even though while this is a book that feels more modern than what Fearless gives me, I just feel like Kath would actually really love the song Fearless. At the end of the novel, she's trying to find that fearless feeling inside of herself because she has to realize that she has to face her fears. She has to face being apart from her twin, she has to face falling in love, confronting her dad and everything, and I think that it could have been a real power anthem for her. Fangirl is about a girl who is just going off to college, and she's always spent time with her twin sister, Ren, and they have been inseparable for most of their lives, but now in college they're finally sort of drifting apart. She is super anxious about classes and everything, and she also wants to be a writer, and she spends a lot of time writing this fan fiction for this book series in this world, which is about Simon Snow, who is essentially kind of like a Harry Potter type character. That is what the story is on, and she writes fan fiction about Simon and Baz, which is the other character, and that book is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. Highly recommend that one as well. It's about her growing to figure out who she is, and also she meets Levi, but she starts to fall for him as well, and it is just such a fun and actually hard-hitting at times read. So if you like the fearless, young excitement that is the Fearless album, I think you would really like this book. The other book I have recommended for the Fearless album is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. I think this book would go really well with the Fearless album. It just has that feeling of young love, and this book does have sort of an insta-love theme to it, but I think it actually works really well for the story, and it reminds me of like You Belong With Me, or like that sort of feeling, that high school love. The Sun Is Also a Star is about two characters who run into each other in New York, and they are very different people, but they agree to decide to spend the day together, and he is trying to convince her that he can make her fall in love with him, and she does not believe him. And she also is very concerned because her family is about to be deported. It is the story of them falling in love and finding each other, and I just feel like it has that really hopeful feeling that Fearless has. Now on to Taylor's third studio album, Speak Now. This is another one I so vividly remember this one coming out. Went to Target obviously to pick it up, and this is actually the first time I got to see Taylor in concert. I won tickets to the Speak Now tour, and it was such a magical night, like just seeing her for real. And when she came out to the B stage, it was actually close to where my seats were, and she was right there and sang like 15 and all this stuff, and it was just absolutely magical. And there are a lot of books that I think could fit this Speak Now because there's a lot of different energies in the Speak Now, but it's still that sort of really happy, hopeful, young love type of thing. But there's also some great like sad songs on this one too. I mean, Innocent, absolute perfection. So let's go ahead and get into my two recommendations for this one. So the first recommendation I have is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Abertali. I don't know why this feels like Speak Now to me, it just does. And I think it's just the coming of age story that you see in this book. It feels like Speak Now does. So Speak Now, I just feel like is really that last moment before she becomes the adult artist that she is. And I feel like this feels like that. I don't know if that makes any sense. But Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda, if you don't already know, which I feel like everyone and their mother does, but this is about Simon Spear, who is a closeted gay teen in his town, and he feels this secret weighing on him every day, and he wants to tell people, but he doesn't know how, and he's afraid of the reaction that he will get. He meets someone on the like Tumblr page they have for their school, which that happens more in teen books than ever. There's no such thing as like a Tumblr specifically for a high school. Maybe somewhere out there, but I have never heard of that in the real world, and for some reason YA authors think all high schools have a Tumblr page where everyone gossips about each other. Anyway, that's off topic. He meets someone on there and he starts emailing with him about how he is also a closeted gay teen at this high school, and he sort of starts falling in love with this person through email. And I think the biggest part about this book though is less so the love story and Simon just figuring out who he is and wanting to be his true self with his friends and his family, and it is an absolutely beautiful book. Like I said, I don't know exactly which song this really fits in Speak Now. It could be Sparks Fly or Long Live, I don't know, but like it just has that really hopeful feeling that Speak Now, because the whole point of Speak Now is, you know, speak now or forever hold your peace, and I just feel like this really fits that idea. The other recommendation I have for the Speak Now album is On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher. Now this one I chose with a specific song in mind. I chose Enchanted. Enchanted's one of my favorite songs ever by Taylor Swift, but the magical feeling that is encaptured in this book just feels so much like that feeling you get when you listen to Enchanted. This book is about Evie Snow, and it starts at the end of her life. She passes away and goes to heaven, but when she gets there she finds out that she goes through this door. She finds herself back in her 27-year-old body, and she gets to sort of relive these parts in her life and see where things went wrong, the regrets she had, but also getting to relive some of the best moments. And it's just such a whimsical and magical book that it fits that enchanted feeling so well. And I would say the feeling that this book gives me is it makes me feel enchanted, and it's just an absolute delight to read. Now on to the next Taylor album. The next one is Red. Now I so distinctly remember when the first single came out for this one. She had done this live stream talking about the album, and I watched it. I think I watched it on Yahoo Live or something. Like, is that even a thing anymore? I don't know. But I watched it and I was so excited for a new album, and this was sort of her real first step away from being exclusively country, even though I would argue Speak Now was not very country. I remember watching the music video that was premiered, and it was We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together, and when it came out I didn't love it right away, but I definitely fell in love with it pretty quickly, and it's still an iconic bop, and the whole Red album is lyrically so good. It's so good. I can't even explain to you how much I love the Red album. I am so sad that I did not get to see the Red tour live. Let's get to the recommendations for the Red album. First off, I have Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. This is just the whole box set of the Infernal Devices. I don't know why, but the feeling of the Red album feels a little bit more indie to me, like it's more acoustic, I don't know, but this feels like that to me, and maybe I just listened to Red a lot when I read this for the first time, I don't know, but the songs just feel like this. A couple that I feel really match Clockwork Angel are Sad, Beautiful, Tragic, Holy Ground, State of Grace, more specifically the State of Grace acoustic, just because I like that one better, but those songs just have this feeling. It's a little bit darker than the other albums, and it just feels like this feels. I don't know how to explain these sometimes. If you don't already know, The Infernal Devices is one of the Shadowhunters series. It follows Tess, who is kidnapped basically by these terrible witchy type women, and she is being forced to use this power that she didn't even know that she had, where she's able to transform into other people. She is thrown into this world of shadow hunters, who are these beings that are part human, part angel, who hunt demons, and she has to be thrown into this magical world, and very quickly she realizes she's not just human, but by the first book she doesn't know exactly what she is. I think this is such a magical series. I love Will and Jam too, and it's a really good book series, and I cannot wait to read more Shadowhunter books obviously in the future. And I just feel like Red, that acoustic indie feeling, fits this London 1890s setting really well. The other recommendation I have for the Red album is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Strange the Dreamer is about Laszlo, who is this librarian who has always dreamed about finding the lost city of Weep. He researches it and he reads about it, and a lot of people though don't believe that it even really exists. And then one day the lost soldiers of Weep show up and invite him to go on these expeditions with him. He gets to go see the city for real. There is a definite magical element to this story, and it's really incredibly written. It is very flowery type writing in a beautiful way, and a lot happens. There's some weird stuff at the end, and I will be honest that this book at times was a little bit confusing for me, but that being said, it is still an incredible read, and I feel like it just fits the magical, whimsical side of Red with still having that dark undertone, because that is what the Red album is to me, is that it's magical a lot of the times on the surface, but there's still this deep hurt on the underside of it, and I feel like that is exactly Laszlo's story as well as the other characters in this book. I feel like this book really matches with Sad, Beautiful, Tragic again, and also Treacherous. It captures that fear and that love and the hope and that feeling of the unknown, as I think what I'm trying to get at. This book is all about finding that unknown. That's what Laszlo has been waiting to do his whole life, and I feel like that's exactly what Red is trying to capture. Okay, so we were on to the pop side of Taylor Swift's career, which is personally my favorite. So her first officially pop album was 1989, and I remember this coming out too. It was so good. I was on I think it was a junior, maybe a senior in high school, and I was on the newspaper magazine thing. I don't know, we only did it for like 4 months and then we like gave up on the idea. But I was on this, and when the 1989 album came out, there was one other girl in my class who was like a really big Swiftie, and we convinced the teacher to let us write like a full review of every song, and so we did that and distributed it to the school. So that's a thing that I did. So let's get into the two recommendations for 1989. 1989 to me is so filled with happiness and love and excitement and going to New York and on your own, and it's just this magical love story, and I really love it. And for a long time, 1989 I listed as my favorite album. I think I've probably said all the albums are my favorite album. It's hard to choose. The first recommendation for 1989 I have is Passenger by Alexander Bracken. This book, on the surface, you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with 1989? Basically nothing, but the feeling of the traveling in this book just makes me feel like 1989 does. I don't know how to explain it. There is the main character, Etta. She is a like world-class violinist or something. Cello, I don't know, she plays an instrument. That is the whole focus of her life, but she also has really bad stage fright and anxiety, and she lives in New York, and she quickly discovers that the world is a lot different than she thought it was. She discovers her family's power to time travel. She gets pushed back in time where she meets Nicholas Carter, who is also part of a time-traveling family, and together they have to sort of figure out the mystery by finding this device that they need, not running into the villains of the people who also want this device, and it's just such a fun adventure. This is a duology, and it is just so well written. I feel like this book goes really well with the song I Know Places and also Wonderland, which are probably two of my favorites on the album, and it also kind of fits with Wildest Dreams and Out of the Woods. So it fits with a lot of the songs. It just has that like excitement and a little bit of darkness, hope, fear. It just is everything. It feels like a whirlwind of emotions, and that is what this book was for me. The other book recommendation I have for 1989 is one I recently read, and that is the Bromance Book Club by Lissa K. Adams. I don't know why this book just screams 1989 to me, but it does. This follows a baseball player named Grant who has been married a couple years until recently he has been on the rocks with his wife and he has moved out, and he really wants to win her back though, so he is helped by his friends who are in this bromance book club where they read romance novels and learn about the relationships in them, and they use that information to apply to their own relationships so they can better their relationships with these women. And it was such a fun read. I literally read it in one day this week and it was so good, and I just feel like it captures a little bit of style, a little bit of wildest dreams. And the song that really got me to choose this book for 1989 though was I Wish You Would, because I just feel like that's a perfect song from the wife's point of view in this book. She doesn't want to hate her husband, she doesn't want to get a divorce, but she feels like he has not seen her in a long time, like he doesn't really understand where she's coming from, but he definitely learns, and they have such great communication in this book, and I just feel like it perfectly fits 1989. Next up is the Reputation album. So after 1989, there was a long period of quietness because of so much drama that happened in the 1989 era, and I really hated those years where Taylor was forced to be so quiet because everyone was criticizing her and ridiculing her, and it was so terrible, and I hated it, and I hate every reporter and journalist who has ever had anything mean to say about her, because I think it comes down to that she's a woman and she wanted to sing about her life and her love and her loss, and people didn't want to hear it. Reputation was her comeback, and I will never forget watching when Look What You Made Me Do came out. The music video was absolutely astounding. It was such an iconic comeback. She took back the narrative and really showed people who she was in such a funny way. She was making fun of all these different personas of herself that people have made her out to be, and she just wanted to be herself. And I really loved it. And Reputation came in an era of my life where I really needed that sort of darker, angry album, I guess you could call it. Although in a lot of ways I think Reputation is still just a love story, but I was having a rough time myself when Reputation came out, just fighting with friends and dealing with college and just a lot of life stressors, and Reputation was the perfect outlet for me at the time. And when I got to see Reputation tour, it was absolutely magical. I saw the 1989 tour as well, and I saw it from literally like one of the very last rows, and I loved it then. But then Reputation, we were lucky enough, we got floor seats, and it was the most magical concert I've ever seen in my life. It is my favorite night probably ever. I was there opening night because Arizona was the opening night of the tour, and it was just so good. Until yesterday, I always said Reputation was my favorite album. Like, I actually said Reputation was my favorite album. I've called them all my favorite, but like, until yesterday, Reputation really was my favorite. Yesterday that kind of changed with Folklore, but we'll get to that. So the two books I chose for Reputation, I now realize are by the same author. I didn't do that on purpose, but it happened. So I'll just do them both at the same time. It is A Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass, both by Sarah J. Maas. I just feel like Sarah J. Maas's main ladies in these books would jam to Reputation. So with Throne of Glass, I mean, Selena, I Did Something Bad, Don't Blame Me, Getaway Car, like all of these just scream Selena to me. Look What You Made Me Do, she is such a strong, independent woman, and she would love Reputation, and I cannot be convinced otherwise. If you don't already know, Throne of Glass is about Selena, who is a world-known assassin, and she has been in this prison. She is freed from the prison by the prince and his guard. I love, that's Kale. And she is put into this competition for the king to become the king's sort of right-hand man, is assassin basically, that he can dispatch you wherever he wants, and it's a competition of a bunch of different criminals and see who's gonna come out on top through all these different trials. So this is a incredible story. I have only read the first 2 in the series. I have like, what, 7 left or something. It definitely fits the Reputation vibe, and I really, really love it. With A Court in Thorns and Roses, if you don't know what this is about, even though I know everyone has read this already, but this is about Feyre, who lives in a world where humans and fairies are separated by a wall because fairies have notoriously been known to be very cruel and violent. She is hunting one day in the woods because her family is very poor and they all rely on her to hunt and feed them and make money, and she kills a wolf in the woods without knowing that it was actually a fairy, and a fairy, Tamlin from the Spring Court, comes into the human world and demands retribution, and so she volunteers herself to go with him so the whole family is not punished. Also, let's just not acknowledge, Dress would be perfect for A Court of Mist and Fury, I'm just saying. Dress is probably one of my all-time favorite Taylor songs, and it would go very well with Feyre and Rhys in the second book, just saying. On to the most recent album before yesterday is Lover. This came out last year. I really like Lover. It definitely is so much different than Reputation, but I loved the lead singles off of it, and I love a lot of the songs. There's a lot of vulnerability in the songs on Lover, and I really love seeing that side of Taylor, and there's a lot of fun songs at the same time, so it's a great mix, and it is a beautifully written album, and I love it. So let's get to the books I recommended for this album. First, a recent read is Conventionally Yours by Annabeth Albert. I don't know why this fits Lover, but it does. The book is about 2 tabletop gamers that are quite famous on YouTube for like their live stream gaming, and they kind of hate each other. Actually, they really hate each other. This is a hate to love story. And so these 2 boys have to travel across the country together though to get to this convention where they are going to play in this big competition for the tabletop game that they play. And along the way, they discover they don't hate each other so much, and they become reluctant friends at first, and then they're friends, and they just really play off each other really well, and they eventually discover that they are falling for each other. And it is a beautiful story. These characters feel so real and amazing, and Annabeth Albert is an incredible romance author. I've only read 2 of her books so far, but I absolutely have loved both of them, and I just feel like it goes with Lover in such an incredible way because the characters both show such immense vulnerability, and I feel like it really fits with like The Archer and Lover and Cruel Summer too, and Cornelia Street. Like, I just feel like it has that balance of vulnerability while falling in love, while also sometimes pushing people away, but learning to love them and love your own flaws, and it's just an incredible read all over. Next, the other recommendation I have for Lover is a book that I think everyone has read, but everyone loves it for good reason. It is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey Mcquiston. This book I read last summer and absolutely adored it, and I picked this for Lover for one specific song, and that is Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince. Red, White, and Royal Blue is about this sort of alternate universe. There is a different president than what we have now, and it is about her son and then the Prince of England. They meet and they hate each other at first, and they've never really gotten along, but they quickly find themselves falling in love because that hate turns into more of a passion, and it is about their secret affair because they are trying to keep everything under wraps because, one, the Prince of England is not out as gay. The president's son, the first son, he is openly bisexual, but it's a big press thing to be 2 boys of huge countries, royalty basically, to be together, and there's a lot of stress with that, and a lot of stress with the prince has not really come to full terms with who he is as a person, and it's just an incredible read. Again, it has that great vulnerability to it in falling in love, but it's also funny and exciting, and it's just an incredible book, and I need to read it again. Lastly, I have the new album, Folklore, which I've only listened to it 2 or 3 times yet, so like I don't know all the songs. This album, I can tell you, is gonna be my new favorite. I love it so, so much. Folklore gives me this feeling, especially Cardigan, the music video, sort of encapsulates it as well, but Folklore gives me this feeling of just like coming home. It's magical and whimsical, and it's sad, but it's content at the same time. It's that feeling of when Harry looks up at Hogwarts for the first time, or when Lucy steps into Narnia for the first time and sees the snowy lamppost. It's just that feeling of home and excitement, and there's a sadness to it, and it's just so good, and I don't even know how to describe it. But I have 4 books for this one just because I literally could not pick, and there's a lot of books that give me that feeling. The first one is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This book I read quite a few years ago at this point, so I have a hard time sort of remembering all of it, but it follows Dante and Aristotle, but it follows them as they fall in love. It's sort of like a friends to lover kind of thing, and they struggle a lot with their relationship because they both are having a hard time accepting themselves as gay, and they don't know how to approach that. Aristotle comes from a more conservative family, and he doesn't know how to face those 2 sides of his life. Even if I don't remember all the details of this book just so closely gets that feeling of, I don't know, like coming home, and the sadness and the excitement and the love so deeply rooted in this book is what I feel in Folklore. Next, I have The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This book is so magical. It follows these 2 magicians. All their lives have been training to outdo each other in this big competition and see who can win with the best magic, and in the end they end up caring more for each other than the competition. This book is so whimsically written. It's so, so good. If you have not read The Night Circus, please read it. And I just feel like it goes really magically with Folklore. Like, if you were listening to Folklore and reading this book, I cannot imagine a better experience. I feel like, just off the top of my head, a couple songs that would go really well from Folklore with this book are Exile and Invisible String. I just feel like they go really well together, and I just think it really is such a magical book, and it fits really well with Folklore. My third recommendation is The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak. This is my favorite book of all time, and I love it so, so much. And the feeling that I get when I read this book of Liesel's story and her journey of falling in love with words is something I really, really get from the Folklore album. Folklore, I feel like, while it's the sound of the album is very cohesive and it's very beautiful and it's kind of muted in a really great way, the lyrics are incredible, and I haven't even learned all the lyrics yet. I haven't been able to dissect everything, but it's such a beautiful story, and I feel like the feeling you get from hearing such incredible poetry in a song is what I get from reading Liesel's story in this book. The last recommendation, because I feel like I have been talking forever, is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. There is no specific thing that I can even describe other than just the feeling I get between this book and this album. You see all these sisters grow up, and I feel like that is sort of the feeling of Folklore. I think the song 7, I think, is what really connected these 2 in my head, and I think you see them grow up and you see them change and grow and discover who they are, and I think that's a lot of what Folklore is about, which is why I chose Little Women for this album. So that is my recommendations based on Taylor Swift albums. I don't know if all these even make sense to anyone but me, but I hope you found some good recommendations and I hope you go listen to Taylor Swift's new album. So thank you for watching, like, share, subscribe, and all that fun stuff, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!